Hey, one and all, or one, or whoever there is. Oh, three people. Hello, you guys. Hello. Oh, let me close the door. I'll be right back. Aesthetics mean more and more to me. Hello, you all. Nice to see you here, and we can talk about anything that's on your mind. And when there's nothing on your mind yet, hey, Michael, good to see you, man. We still have to talk economics sometime. You and I, just one on one in a Zoom call, so I can understand where you're coming from. I look forward to that. Let's see. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can turn up the light a bit here. I've got all of that electronically controlled now. So fancy. Wow. Okay, now we're getting that Rembrandt look. Let's see. This morning I woke up with seeking a word. So you understand that for 35 years now, I've been saying to name it is to tame it. And I see that cutting two ways. That is, you can neutralize something by naming it. You're just projecting. But also that it gives you a way to spot things that are spot the birds that fly by in thought and conversation. It was one of the earliest moves I started to make, was to come up with terms. And I've coined, I don't know how many, 3,000, 4,000, but I keep on coming up with things that need a name. And I'm giving an example of how I think, but I'm also inviting you. Hey, Rob from Cleveland, great to have you here. Yeah, good. Thank you, Michael, about setting up a time we can meet. So what'll happen is I'll say, we need a word for this thing. And I make a point of never coining terms that already have terms that work right, though there are plenty of terms that come with baggage, and I'm trying to get away from the baggage. And some of my terms are neutral, some are negative, some are positive. I speak in three languages, and I invite you to do the same as well. I could call someone pig-headed, or I could call them steadfast. Pig-headed is negative, steadfast is positive. I could say sticking with what they previously, sticking with habits is neutral. Okay. I want to be able to talk in all three languages. I don't want to ask myself questions like, am I being pig-headed, without also remembering the possibility that I'm being steadfast? And I don't want to say, well, I'm just being steadfast, without remembering that it's possibly pig-headed. The only difference between steadfast and pig-headed that I've been able to find is is prognosis. If I think it's a bad move, I'll call it pig-headed. If I think it's a good move, I'll call it steadfast. So here's the concept I wanted to work with this morning, and what inspired it. So the news as of yesterday was that President Trump is facing growing signs of political trouble as his approval rating has dropped sharply among low-income Americans. Let's see, in 1 month, it went down 44 points from 55% approve. This is low-income voters. And now it, in September, collapsed to 31% approve. And I'm also finding Trumpists afraid to admit they were wrong. And so I was looking for a term, a generic term. It wouldn't be about the Trumpists especially. A generic term for the fear of admitting you were wrong, the fear of admitting you bought into something wholeheartedly, steadfastly, pig-headedly, and that you made a mistake. So you could say eating humble pie, but that's actually not what I want to get at. I want to get at the way in which people cling to an idea that gives them comfort and won't let go of it because they're in effect addicted to it. So the first term I came up with this morning, and both of these are to be beat. If you have a better term for it, let's talk about it, because I swear the way I think, right or wrong, good or bad, but the way I think is grounded in these terms. It gives me a way to name it is to tame it. It gives me a way to see what flies by in my own thoughts, in other people's thoughts, in conversation, all of that. So I love having these terms, and they're really how I think. So the first term I came up with was banal retentive. These are people who are full of shit, but are afraid to dump it. I thought it was good. It was too highbrow. And then I came up with constupated. there's actually a lot going on in that. That's like a triple entendre or something like that. So they're conned, they're stupid, um, they're aided by their stupidity in staying conned. So it was so constipated. Constipated is what's going on with a bunch of Trumpists right now. Um, it seems to me, but it could happen to anyone. And there is this question about how do you get people beyond that? How do you get them brave enough to admit they were wrong? And I had a fabulous experience this week, uh, full of darkness and sadness around a friend. So I want to say a little bit about this because it's an interesting example. Remember, I'm also a lab. Nothing human is foreign to me. I'm a lab for what goes on in humans. So this friend dumped me summarily. He was a really important friend to me, a good friend, and he suddenly decided I was too mean, too tough, too aggressive, um, and he tried to tell me, but he's not a fighter, and he's a guy who believes who he's conflict averse is what I would say, but I would also say that like most people who are conflict averse, he had come up with moral and strategic justifications like for it. The standard moves. Conflict never works. It always backfires. And not only that, it's morally wrong. So one of the consequences is that this was a guy who doesn't have much practice fighting. He doesn't like it, but he also doesn't think he should like it. He doesn't have much practice with it. Bless his heart. He actually is a wonderful guy and very kind and much loved by his circle of friends, all of whom went silent when he dumped me. And this happened about 8 months ago. And now my style has always been when I get anxious, I talk. It's my toolkit. I want to talk more when things are getting awkward or cringe. And that has not been always met with welcomeness because I've honed my talking skills and I don't necessarily know my own power. And so when he started to attack me when he started to accuse me of being too mean, too rude, all of this sort of stuff, his style was to get on his high horse and preach down to me. He said, this is all about you, Jeremy. You're the problem here. And he said, you're leaving a wake of carnage among friends and family. He was trying to do an intervention with me. And my reaction to it was, don't get on your high horse. I wasn't going to even address his issues if he's doing it from on high. And for the last 8 months, I've mostly thought, well, I did all I could. I claimed to have the consolation of thoroughness that I had tried with this guy, and there was just no talking to him. And yet still it haunted me. It left me unsettled. Then I had a conversation on Wednesday night with a mutual friend, the only mutual friend who still talks to me, who was kind of neutral about it. And I heard myself explaining what happened. And I came away feeling like my explanation was hollow. And then I realized that, no, actually, I'd misplayed it. In terms of carrots and sticks, this was a guy who was up a tree, scared by our interactions, and was throwing rocks down on me from that tree. So this is this really interesting mix, what I'm calling a scaredy brat. Someone who's really scared, but is acting like a brat to you, like they're on their high horse. I simply misplayed it. It was bad strategy on my part. I don't think his moral argument works for me, that you should always be nice, you should always be kind. I'm very clear on that, but I played it wrong. I simply played it wrong. And it was interesting because I had this feeling after talking to this friend, and then that night I really didn't sleep well. It was like I was grieving the end of the relationship in a new way, recognizing my own responsibility for having mistatted. That's a term I coined early on. Tit for tat, I tatted as though he was attacking me. He was attacking me. I mean, he really was. We were musical friends, and he said my wife and I were watching the Sly and the Family Stone bio documentary, and we both decided that you were like Sly Stone. I mean, he's really basically saying you're off the deep end, Jeremy. But I felt relief afterwards. And so, I mean, I hope the story is something you can relate to a bit because I think I'm solving for pattern. I'm interested in what went on in me and the various ways in which the process played out. Now, I've long thought that in a breakup, you got two people who had a common story about what was good about them, and suddenly the magnet flips for one of them, and suddenly the more you pull on them, the more they move away from you. And in general, I assume it's not very easy to process what went wrong with someone it went wrong with. You mostly can't do that. I don't believe in ghosting. That's not decent. But I do believe in not trying to maintain the common story with someone who's decided you're bad, or if you've decided someone's bad. I don't think you're going to learn the same lessons. It's kind of like you go from being a nice blend to suddenly being oil and water. The story the other person has to tell is going to be polarized to your story. Um, so you're kind of stuck processing the end of a relationship on your own. We're in conversation with others. And a relationship is a bolus, a tangle of tentacles holding you together. I mean, the number of things, let's say in a partnership or in a really important friendship, or with your parents or with your children or whatever, there were a lot of things that brought you together and held you together that is related to the falling up story that I'll get back to in just a minute, Michael. Um, uh, so you sit there trying to untangle that bolus and try to figure out, okay, well, this tentacle was inappropriate. That one was good. You're trying to figure it out, but you're doing it in a biased state because you're actually hurting and hoping the problem isn't you. That is, you'd like to come away from it without regret. And I'll mention something about regret. I think of regret as like an alarm clock that goes on inside us, a disconcerting feeling, a feeling like something's amiss. That is motivation to learn something from a situation. We don't especially like to learn. Learning is expensive. People who say, hey, I'm open-minded, I'm receptive, I don't buy it. No. I mean, learning is expensive. Not as expensive as not learning, but it still costs something in the short term. So there you are trying to sort out the relationship, kind of trying to play umpire above it and say, well, okay, I think this is what happened. It's a kind of going meta move. So you say, I think this is what happened, but you're doing it with your thumb on the scale because you actually don't want to find out the problem is you. And in general, what happens is you do that for a while, and then as the pain subsides of having lost someone whose opinion of you was positive and is now negative, for example, you take the whole bolus that was your relationship and you dump it into a box and you label it oversimplistically. That is, if someone asked me what happened in one of my old partnerships or asked one of my old partners, the answer would be oversimplistic. But you dump the whole bolus into a box, you label it succinctly and oversimplistically, and you stuff it in the attic of your memory. Okay, so what I was noticing about this relationship is, and then what happened this last week is I finally could relax into some regret about my strategic approach with this guy. And I assume he's lost, but I feel somehow like I'm now in a place to be able to stuff that bolus into a box, label it succinctly, stick it in the storage of my attic, the attic of my memory, and move on from it. So, and it was interesting to me how it went because I'm trying to be less self-gullible. I'm trying to be able to face regrets when I have them, and I wasn't actually comfortable. I thought I was getting comfortable with saying, "Yeah, I did everything I could." But there's a relief for me in saying, "No, I fucked up. I fucked up strategically. I paid attention to his high horse behavior as if we were the old friends we were when I simply didn't notice that he no longer trusted me at all. And I could have humored him. I could have ignored his high horse moves, but I didn't. And that was a mistake. It was a strategic mistake, not a moral mistake. I don't feel like a bad person for it. This was during the time when I was getting the most hits on YouTube for saying we've got to stop letting the Trumpists get away with being on their high horse. There will be a tendency to overgeneralize the lessons we're learning. He who's burnt by hot milk blows on ice cream. You think all dairy products are dangerous. Um, so so anyway, I'm interested in that. I'm interested because I'm also interested in what it would take for the constipated to relax and admit they were wrong, that they made a mistake, before it's too late, before they end up having to say, hey, my bad. I thought that Trump was going to make America great, yet I didn't expect nuclear war. Hey, everybody makes mistakes. I'm hoping that happens before then. Okay. All right. Let me take a look here. After your recent video about falling up, I was wondering this. How do we make the Trumpers feel that they've fallen up from Trump, fallen up out of Trump to some next level? Michael, that's very much related to this thing I was just talking about. And so falling up, for those who didn't see the video, and not nearly enough people did. I don't know. YouTube sent me a message the other. No, vidIQ, one of these services that helps you with marketing, says you should just focus on one thing. I am focused on one thing. It's just kind of broad. It covers a lot of ground, and I think I don't get many views because it's not so obvious what I'm selling. It's not like you can come back to me and assume that you'll get a reinforcement of what I said last time. I'm kind of broad. It's my middle age spread now that I'm past middle age. So let's see. Falling up. Falling up is how synergies happen. Falling up is how they happen, not whether they're good or not. In general, so this is based in biology, where my research colleague Terrence Deacon is writing a whole book about it. He's almost done with it. It's amazing. I think of it as the other half of Darwinism. Darwinism is natural selection. Natural selection is the failure of things. It's a strictly negative process. It reduces things, and there's been this long question in evolutionary biology. Okay, yeah, but how do you get these creative complexities? How do you get multicellularity? How do you get sexuality, which is the founding of a kind of synergy between two individuals? You wouldn't actually expect that to happen because people have to give up, or organisms have to give up some of their autonomy. Well, the answer that we've gotten from biology over the longest time is, well, it would be adaptively useful to have synergies. So, for example, united we stand, divided we fall. That's why there are synergies. But that still doesn't answer the question. Yeah, but how do people give up their individuality? How do organisms give it up? I mean, I got all these cells that are actually committed to each other, doing work for each other. It's basically altruism at the cellular level. How the fuck does that happen? It does, because natural selection doesn't explain it. Well, Terry's approach, Terry Deacon, my research colleague, is, from my perspective, extremely obvious, extremely intuitive, and extremely practical. And it applies as much to nasty movements like the Trumpists, to Michael's point, but also to all sorts. Whether it's good or bad, it's advantageous to the individual, and here's how it becomes advantageous. And I'll just use the most obvious kind of example. So I'll use a personal example, but this goes all the way down, I think, to the origins of life. Okay. You want to feel your confidence, and you mostly do. You kind of run between real confident, like 90% confident, and maybe 70%. And then you meet this person in a romantic situation, and they subsidize your confidence. They really make you feel good about yourself during the honeymoon period. And so you actually don't have to maintain your own confidence as much because you've actually got someone there. So if you're down one day, your partner will say, yeah, no, cheer up. You're a good person. I love you. That sort of thing. And you don't recognize that you're actually, you don't need to maintain as much self-confidence or self-generated confidence because you're subsidized. You got someone else who's supporting you this way. And as a matter of fact, you feel like, yeah, you're more confident than ever and more independent minded than ever because, after all, you feel confident easier than you used to. You only notice that you don't feel as confident if the person goes away, if the person dies, if the person dumps you. I love this statement from William Somerset Maugham: the tragedy of love is not death, it's indifference. Um, or when someone basically dumps you, decides that you're not a good person after all. Then you notice that you were subsidized. You don't miss your water till your well runs dry. And that applies to all sorts of things that we are dependent upon. So falling up is I actually lose capacity to do for myself because something else is doing for me. And as a result, I get addicted to that thing that is doing for me. And we have a synergistic relationship. Whether it's good or bad is a separate question. And for that, you have to get your moral sense out of the way. I'm not going to say, well, synergy is good. No, I don't want to do that. I want to say synergy is synergy. It's a product of addictions. And addictions can be good or bad. I happen to love my addictions. I really lucked out in the addiction department. I am totally dependent on things that I really think are good for me. Now, some would call that love, and I would call it either one. I actually don't care. All I know is that I'm in a synergistic relationship with things that I value. Now, most people would say they're in synergistic relationships with things they value, even alcoholics. So people are free to disagree with me about whether my habits are good for me or not, but my synergistic habits, my codependency is another negative word that actually shouldn't be. I'm dependent on the other person. They're dependent on me. That's love. Okay, whether it's good or bad is a separate question, but I just want to understand it. So this, I think, relates to something that, yes, let's see, I'm half the views on your falling up video. Good. Michael, if you can say a little bit more about that, I think that would be useful for us here. Because one thing you might say is, well, I'm not addicted to Amazon or something. I'd love to hear what you're saying there because that would be really useful. By the way, hello, Shirley Crane. Good to see you here. And my offer still stands, by the way, that we could do this as a Zoom call where people could talk. Just email me and we could do that. We could switch off of YouTube and do it there. And I could record it even if people felt like that was safe enough. I'm going to start to record the Sunday meetings if I can get my group to agree to it. Jeff Cheney, you made it. I hope the affair you went to was strong. That was soulful and hearty, and you got something out of it. But nice to see you back. Better late than never. So, so the falling up thing is, I think, very important. And I would say, yes, the Trumpists have fallen up into exactly what I described. It's an addiction. I mean, you remember, heroin is so named because it made everybody feel like a hero. Trumpism is heroin. It's what I'm calling a symboloma, which is a cancer of the symbols, a highly aggressive, highly invasive cancer of the symbols. Symbols meaning language. That is, any culture can come up with a synergistic coupling of ideas that feel airtight. I told you that I looked up the etymology of the word paradise, and it means walled around. It originally meant walled around. So that's what a thought bubble is a kind of a paradise that people can get into. Paradise is addictive, and you don't want to escape the bubble. So yes, I would say that's what we're dealing with. And I don't really much care that it's Trumpism. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I have the same concerns if it was any other unchecked movement. And I want to get to this thing about checked. I looked up where it comes from this morning. There is what they call the etymological fallacy, which is that a word currently means what it originally meant, or that's the right meaning of it. Now, words migrate all around, and yet I still find fascinating insights from it. Check came originally from chess and from the king, the Shah. Shah and check come from the same root. Um, and what you're talking about is blockages, a check. There's something that constrains something. And you've heard me say it before. I don't think checks and balances does enough to describe what's going on. It's checks in balance. And Trumpism, though I loathe it, is checks and balance. It's checks and balance that makes it a symboloma that is an aggressive cancer that is overriding all other checks in balance. Checks in balance. You want balance checks. If you're going to maintain anything like a body or a government or anything, you want checks in balance. And what you'll get is these cancers that are unchecked. And that's fascinating. As was a conversation I had this week. I had a 2-hour conversation with my dear friend, the Zionist Trump supporter, and he had proposed a game for us, and I found it fascinating. He said, what if I lay out a bunch of statements and we both decide negative or positive whether we agree with them? So -10 to +10. And when he did that, I knew all these questions because he'd asked them before of me early on. Uh, I'll see if I can remember some of them. Charlie Kirk was not a racist. January 6th wasn't an insurrection. Um, uh, Israel is not engaged in genocide. The ozone hole is getting larger despite the bans on fluorocarbons, that kind of stuff. And we then had a 2-hour conversation in which we went through the list and checked out our different answers. And he was surprised by some of mine. For example, one of the questions I posed was whether democracy is stronger than fascism. And my answer is no. I wish it were, but I think fascism is a symboloma. It's a cancer that is more invasive, and this is something I've changed my mind on. When I was growing up, we had just beaten the fascists, and the general sense was that democracies like ours, dubious question whether we were fully a democracy given the electoral college and all of that, or a democratic republic. I'm fine with that. That's what we really are, is a democratic republic. Republic meaning that autonomy is granted at different levels of hierarchy. So individuals have freedom, but also they're controlled by their local community, their town, their mayor, governor, like that. That's what a republic would be. The conversation was fascinating. I was very loving to him during it, and I was also incredibly blunt with him. Let's see. He wanted one of his questions. Just to give you an example of it, was climate change is man-made, and as we talked it through, it was clear that he thought it was unlikely to be, and therefore there was nothing he needed to do about it. And all of his questions were like that. That is, when he answers a question, he's done it. It always is a rationalization from my perspective, and I told him so. A rationalization for not having to think about it anymore. So take, for example, the ozone depletion one. He said, we did this ban on fluorocarbons and the hole's getting bigger. So therefore, there's no need for any kind of centralized work on it. We don't need to do anything about it. January 6th wasn't an insurrection, and therefore I don't have to worry about it. It was completely fine. Charlie Kirk wasn't racist because he hired a few people who were of other races, that kind of thing. And every one of them is a way for him to stay constipated. That's my sense of it. And I was incredibly blunt with him about it. Darling, you have kids. I have kids. We are concerned for future generations, right? Okay. So if the ozone hole is growing and you are self-satisfied in your complacency, it's clear you're not actually interested in the future. You're interested in complacency. That's what's going on for you, sweetheart. And he took it well. He asked at the end what was how we rated the conversation. He said, I thought it was going to be a -2, but it turned out to be an 8 for me. And for me, I said it was a 10. I didn't expect him to be willing to hear me that well. Um, so yeah, all of this is around the addictions to bubbles of checks and balances that wall around our beliefs and make it so that you can dispense with anything external. And the thing about paradise is you can feel, if you get yourself walled around, you can feel like life is a dream because you've walled out everything that makes life complicated. All of that. And then some. Okay, let me see. Yes, I think you need a softer way of reaching people besides concepts. Thank you for that. I think that's right. Um, a lot of people think I'm awfully abstract and theoretical. And I feel like I'm trying to be practical and that my abstractions are extremely concrete as compared to a lot of abstractions. But I think it's something more at the visceral level. I think there are a lot of people who just don't go there on big picture thinking the way I do. It's like if you're gonna start to think about the cluster flux of life, you want to come in not just with questions but with answers. You want to know what you feel about it right away, what your opinion is. So if you're going to be a big picture thinker, you also want to be kind of a big picture authority. And then there are people who just have no practice dealing in that realm. And then there are people who have practice, but it's all with a doctrine. I'll give you an example of how this plays out, not in everyday life, though there's lots of it. You can find this in all the self-help books. They'll raise a question, but they'll also answer it within their book. But one place this plays out big time is Noam Chomsky's approach to linguistics. So he posed a question that people hadn't thought about much before. But he accompanied it immediately with an answer that's ridiculous. That's just absurd. I mean, I think fifth grader could come up with it, maybe a fourth grader. But people say, "Wow, that's a big idea I hadn't thought of. Here's the solution." And now for 40 years, linguistics, the study of linguistics, has been off on his silly solution. So let me frame that up. He's saying language is too complicated to learn. Yeah, if you have to learn the grammar, it's true. So he was arguing against the people who said, well, kids learn language by reward and punishment, basically behaviorism or Skinnerism. He said language can't be learned. Therefore, there has to be a grammar module in your head that just happened by accident. That is basically a computer that does all the grammar of whatever language you get. So you're born into a culture and you plug in all the variables, all the terms that are local to your culture, and your grammar module processes it. Like I say, a fifth grader could come up with that answer. That's not how it works. And in fact, we do learn, as you well know. How do you learn language? As a kid, how do I learn language with my friend who I lost? It's the same thing. Based on rewards on punishment of whether you get your point across. And points are part of the point. A kid starts out by saying, and then little by little starts transferring to the mouth. But if the mouth doesn't articulate it well, then he's not going to get the bottle she wanted. So there's a lot to learning a language, but there's not a universal grammar module, and you can learn it. Kids do learn it. And not only that, language co-evolved with us. It had to be learnable. Religion is the same way. Religion has to be something you can teach to kids. That's why it's so fairy tale-like. Anyway, lots there. Let's see. I'm looking for threads because I want to speak with you. That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay. So, yeah, and then we fall up into language. We are addicted to language. I'm addicted to it. The idea of being able to reach beginner's mind where I'm beyond concepts is a concept that I'm beyond. I don't buy it. I'm going to be thinking in language for the rest of my life. Okay. Our brains keep score. Good. Score keeping. Our brains keep score. Do they do it quantitatively, or do they do it kind of impressionistically? So this relates to the question of whether we are computers, and a lot of people influenced by Chomsky and beyond think we are computers. We're just computers in the brain. That our brains are just computers. Um, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Terry wrote what I think is a breakthrough article about consciousness. Um, uh, so I'll say a little bit more about that because it's related to the scorekeeping thing. It would seem impressionistically, that's my impression of it. And also with all sorts of fudging of the books, but that we cook the books and we cook them in opposite ways. So if I really love someone, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and I'll say my bad, maybe just so I can win them over. Why am I trying to win them over? Because I'm addicted to them, because they're a source of comfort for me. They do it by reading it into it something personal. Minds read into it something personal. Remember, for all my abstract conceptualizing, I am quite confident that we run primarily on comfort in our own skin, period. Anybody who's dealt with a stomach ache or acid reflux or a headache or anything or a sore knee, you know how fucking convincing that stuff is. Okay. And anybody who has dealt with feeling like you're in the doghouse or like you're stupid or can't keep up or anything, you know that feeling. I know that feeling. Can we agree on that we are driven by comfort in our own skin first and foremost? I have no problem admitting to it. Because I think it's the best way for me to track what's actually going on with me. So yeah, I lost sleep the other night over this friend. My spirits go up and down, um, based on all sorts of external indicators. If I get a row of things that are disappointing to me, um, I'll start to wonder if there's a pattern here, if I've got some kind of fatal flaw. Um, you know, I don't want to have that thought. So I try to keep it at bay. But sometimes, mistakes come in threes or whatever. I don't believe in that stuff. But if you get a string of uh-ohs or oops, then yeah, you can start to wonder. Your doubts can turn into self-doubt, doubt about whether you have what it takes to deal with the doubts you're dealt. So yeah, I would say that impressionistic scorekeeping is live in us humans, and very understandably, and amplified by language, because language enables us to scold, to talk down, to defend ourselves, to get defensive, to even wonder if we're good dogs. When I say good dog to Terry's dog, I have a feeling that the dog keeps score in a way. It's more episodic. It's for a moment. The dog feels good dog. I mean, it's a little bit like a doggy treat. But I'm also confident that the dog doesn't have a general sense of its character, doesn't wonder what it's like as a being. I think it takes language to do that. Language by which, for example, you can describe yourself, not in words, but you would do it through your concepts as outside of you looking at yourself. It's it's the source of this in uh, almost oppressive degree of empathy that humans can get into. And I don't mean empathy like sympathy. I mean the ability to put myself into someone else's shoes. So in my more anxious youth, there was a whole lot of, what does this guy think about me? Well, how do I look to this person? As I was groping to figure out what I was and how I could gain and maintain comfort in my own skin. It was pretty severe for me. I think it's probably severe for a lot of people, but it does seem. I felt it, and I'm glad I felt it, because it kind of puts me in touch what it's like to be a human. Okay, see, relating seems about right. Relating, relationship, credits, debts, scorekeeping. Here's a funny thing related to that. I once was going to write a book called The Meaning of Life for CPAs. I was going to do a whole series, Meaning of Life for Lawyers, and I was going to drop it all into their jargon. because it all could be worked out that way. And the reason CPAs came up right away is because I think there's a kind of social double entry bookkeeping going on for us. Um, uh, I'm keeping track of accounts payable, accounts receivable. And in a friendship, I'm actually cooking the book in favor of the other person. So if someone borrows a tool from me and I have to remind him 2 or 3 times to return it to me before he finally does, and he returns it to me, I'll say thank you. I could say it a little snarky, but I'm saying here, no, thank you. I mean it, and I mean it to cook the books. That was an account payable, receivable. He owed me my tool back, and he took too long to get it to me. But I'm going to err on the side of generosity, and I'm going to cook the books in his favor by treating it as though it was a gift for him to return it to me. And in partnership, you do a whole lot of this. It's how you keep the peace. It's you're both, because it's so intense. You're in there for a sustained relationship for a long time. You're going to try to keep the peace. You're going to try to give the benefit of the doubt. You're going to try to suspend your counting. You're keeping track, the credits and debts, scorekeeping. But no one does completely. So if you have a friend who you're always paying it forward with, you do generous things for them on the prospect that they'll do generous things back and all of that. You give an inch, they give an inch, that sort of thing. If they start to take a mile, you'll notice. You never totally dropped your scorekeeping. And so Paul Simon has a line in a song I love, negotiations and love songs are often mistaken for one and the same. What I think he means by it is that it's easy to get confused about whether it's a negotiation, a business transaction where you're actually keeping track of accounts payable, accounts receivable, or whether you're not counting. It's a love song. A love song is, I provide you with universal, I'll give you everything. I have a friend who's an evolutionary biologist who did research, trying to understand why we promise the moon to partners. And he came to this conclusion. He said, "You can, imagine if I said to a prospective partner, hey, I'm a 7. Well, I'm a 7. And you seem like a 7. So it's close enough. If I turned out to be an 8 or an 8 got interested in me, I'd probably upgrade. You don't do that in partnership. You say you're the top. You're a 10. You're infinite. You're worth so much more than I am. If baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top, as the song goes. We promise the moon. We say you can have all of me. Why not take all of me? That is the theme in those moments, and it's hormonally subsidized, and it's a big investment. It's a big bet. From the outside, from a neutral position, it looks like a surprisingly large bet. Hormonally subsidized for sure. That is, there's a lot of conviction around falling in love that is just visceral. But you're talking about feeling enthusiastic about someone for all of eternity. And I only see a few places where humans make that dubious claim. And one is partnership and the other is cults. That I'm going to be enthusiastic forevermore about this. Anyway, so let's see. Yes, social credits and debts. You cook dinner and I'll do the dishes. Michael, and this does relate to falling up. So if I was partnered with someone for a long time and they subsidized, they were an external source of confidence for me. They're not just an external source of confidence, they're an external source of other things. So what happens with falling up is a division of labor. So I do the cooking, my partner does the accounting. And so when the partner disappears, dies, gives up on me, moves on, upgrades to an 8, my skills as an accountant have atrophied, and I got to regain them. I'm talking about exactly the same thing that happens with heroin. I make my own heroin all the time. I live on internally generated morphine. It's called endorphins. And sometimes I really try to stir them up. How do I do that? By stressing myself. So I do heavy exercise because that fills me with that drug. I love that drug. Sometimes I'll do really spicy food because that causes stress that gives me lots of that drug. Well, if I get an external source of morphine, um, I downregulate the production of it myself, and that's what cold turkey is about. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. Why was I more of a man before? Because I had this external source of something. And this is just true across the board. And then there are things you could never get back. And then there are things that it takes a while to get back. So you can start to reproduce your own endorphins, but it's a hard slog up out of the down regulation that you dealt with. But another example that I've shared a couple times, I'll just repeat it briefly here. All mammals produce their own vitamin C. You don't have to give a cat vitamin C. It doesn't have to eat fruit. We used to be able to do that. That is, primates long time ago did. But we fell up into a relationship with fruit because we climbed up into trees 35 million years ago. We were out in the daylight because we were no longer on the ground and nocturnal. And suddenly we had this external source of vitamin C. And geneticists have tracked. They know exactly which genes are essential for producing your own ascorbic acid. And we've got those genes, but they're full of junk. They're junk DNA. They're no longer functional genes. And no, you can't get them back. And so as a result, you end up with this. We are addicted to external sources of anti-rust. That's what vitamin C is. Oxygen is a very reactive chemical. It's a classic example of what I talk about as a challenge for all living beings, which is that we have to take in the energy we can use to regenerate us and not the energy that degenerates us. And life on Earth was actually about to collapse because of the trees were putting out so much oxygen, and oxygen is very rusting. And so corrosive is what I mean. And then we came up with techniques for using it. So that was a wonderful adaptation, a way to exploit what was a poison. Terry speculates that the same could eventually happen with radiation. That is, if a planet got populated with radioactivity, there could be organisms that figure out how to actually have internal nuclear power sources. Not impossible, he speculates. But anyway, we ended up addicted to vitamin C. And if you really want to understand how things move around, how people change, if you're trying to track the cluster flux, this falling up thing is really interesting. A lot of my background's in microeconomics, which is studying the supply and demand of things that are of value and how the values shift. So because we were now addicted to vitamin C from fruit, we ended up with color vision. Biologists will tell you that's the reason we ended up with it. About 35 million years ago, we got it to distinguish ripe from unripe fruit. And how did we get it? There's another piece of the story. So you're just following how things change, how things shift around, and they're not done consciously. They're done by basically what's the most efficient way for me to get what I want. So we ended up with color vision because we used to only have rods for monochromatic vision because we were nocturnal. We lived in the dark. That's the only time we could get out and go get a bite to eat. This was before Denny's was open 24 hours, but it was still the only time you could get out and get a bite to eat. And you needed all of the retinal real estate you could get just to pick up any photons at all. And now we're up in trees, and we no longer need all of those rods. We don't need them all, and they start to deform. So this is what we call relaxed selective pressure. You have a capability, and it's not under selective pressure. You don't need it anymore. And so it starts to morph. What does it morph into? Cones. And that's how we end up with color vision. Very fortunate. kind of swapping around. And now think of all the things we do with color vision, and think of all the work we have to do to maintain our senses. One of the things that we have to deal with one of the things I deal with philosophers is that there's almost like a couch potato attitude about what a living being is, like it senses something through a sensor. And there are very high level scientists who talk as if, yeah, there's really no difference between a photoelectric cell and eyes. It's just more photoelectric cell. They talk like we're machines. No, I have to do lots of ongoing work just to maintain my eyes. And you can see this is when a body dies, those eyes stop working right away. And in no time, they're never going to work again. So what I'm saying is, if you want to follow what happens to people, follow what they got addicted to or fell in love with or got codependent with. You really can learn about people's behavior that way. I think it's the best way to track what happens in people's behavior. The funny incident on the side, I was out taking a walk with Terry the other day, and he said, yeah, tomorrow's my 24th anniversary marriage. I said, the best predictor of behavior, from my perspective, is the company someone keeps. How have you changed as a result of being in this partnership for 24 years? And he says, well, I'm much more accommodating than I used to be. I wasn't very accommodating in my first marriage. And my response was, yeah, that's why I'm not married. He takes teases like that fine, and he knows what I am. I'm kind of feral. But and partners in the past, when I had partners, accused me of being feral, half admiringly and half actually not admiringly. But I said, no, I'm actually not feral. I'm domesticated or codependent on other things. So, yeah, more and more of us are beginning to weigh the pros and cons of partnership. Certainly not if you're in one and trying to make it work. But if you're not in one, whether it's worth it becomes an issue. And for me, again, it's all about, where do you fuss? Where do you do dedicated work to maintain something that you're dependent upon? What checks and balance relationships are you trying to maintain with someone? So you got to take fleas with the dog, and they got some things that they're trying to change about you, and you're trying to change them a little bit, but not that much, because overall you love each other, or it's worth it, or you're codependent, or you're addicted, or whatever word you want to use for that. So, yeah, what I'm addicted to is this kind of attempt at power of neutral thinking, the ability to just step back and look at us and try and understand us without a lot of moral distractions, no thumbs on the scale, no hope, no despair, just trying to see us. What are we? For me, that's satisfying. And it wasn't easy when I was with a partner. It's not easy for all of my friends. Some of them find my observations uncomfortable, and I certainly understand why. If I had a different life, I would find them uncomfortable too. Some find them uncomfortable for a while, and then they get into it. Some and spar back, do the same thing. I love that. Some love my strong opinions as long as it feels like it supports what they already believe. But the ones I really love, the friends I aim to keep, are those who are curious with me. And again, I just have to keep on caveating it. I could be completely wrong about all this stuff. This is speculative work. I cannot engage in this attempt at the power of neutral thinking without discovering that I spent my entire life barking up the wrong tree. Okay, so people are listening. It either means I'm riveting or whatever, but I wish someone would pose a pointed critique at me. Someone put me in my place. Someone tell me what they're actually thinking about. Someone tell me a better term than constipated. Think with me here and share a thought you've got, even half baked. We can play with any idea. This is fun. There we go. You're doing great. There we go, Kyle. Thank you. Okay, I'll give you another related story. Stories are usually better than not. So when I first joined Terry's research, uh, and it soon, shortly after, became actually a research group that meets every week on Friday. We met last night and had a conversation. It by Zoom. Anybody can join. Uh, it takes a certain kind of person to want to join and also to understand what we're doing there. But it was filled with some people with some status. For example, there was a Yale philosophy professor who joined the group. And there's another guy who was in charge of all the wind projects in California. He was Jerry Brown's Secretary of Wind Energy. But before that, he had gone to seminary with Jerry Brown and then gotten a PhD in philosophy of science and from Columbia. And I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome. I mean, this is like 10 years. Ignoramus is an old one. Yes, ignoramus, by the way, I didn't coin that one. I love that one. I look for words that combine dumb with nasty. Dipshit, dumbass, ignoramus are the only ones I found, but there's a complementarity between them. When you're dumb, you'll throw tantrums. When you throw tantrums, you can't afford to learn. You can't afford to show any doubt. So they do tend to go that way. But anyway, yeah, I was feeling like a dummy in this group. They knew vastly more background history. I knew it was worth it for me. I was going to take the sense that I was not that bright. And then on top of that, both of those guys seemed to me in retrospect to have needed to prove that they were of high status. One in particular kept on name dropping about the people he'd read and all of this sort of stuff. Standard human stuff about feeling good about ourselves. You've heard me say it. I'm very egotistical and very vain. I'm just not egotistical and vain enough to pretend I'm not. That's a step too far. And there was a little bit of this, oh no, I'm not vain, and then the vain behavior from these other people, and it was dogging me. And maybe that was some of the advantage. We were almost like, even though the ages weren't right, we were almost like siblings vying for Terry's appreciation, which was very hard to read because Terry was always just right there for us, this Harvard, Berkeley neuroscientist who's happy to talk with us. But he never said anything like, this is wonderful, I'm grateful for this, or this is nice. There were no kudos back. There's no affirmation. And then one day I realized something that has proven useful for me in general. And it does relate to something that someone said, relating, let's see, it was this. I had decided that I was going to try to make Terry's work more accessible. These other guys were more into what I call a pedagogical license. That is, we can say this as complicated as we want because people should listen to us. If the student doesn't understand me, the student has to just kind of grow up. I wasn't into that. I was actually trying to figure out how to say it as intuitively as possible. For example, that vitamin C story I just told you, and the parallels to love and relationship. And Terry was kind of a little off-put by that. He was afraid that I was going to be the Oprah Winfrey that distorted his theory. It's just a nervous tick of his, as far as I'm concerned. And that one that he's gotten over. He's fine with what I do with this stuff. But then I realized, okay, the way I'm going to handle this, I had learned about mini-maxing in my PhD in decision theory. Mini-maxing is you minimize the maximum cost in a situation. It's a kind of a risk-related move. You say to yourself, what's the worst that could happen here? And then you figure out how to minimize it. So this is a real tool I really use and invite you to use as well. Come to think of it, it may be how to get over constipation. Okay. So what I said to myself is, okay, I'm in these meetings. I'm worried that I'm going to say something dumb. I've got imposter syndrome. There's these other people who keep on punking me with their academic authority. I'd already decided that the better I get at not feeling like the best, the better I get to be. But as I was actually mooching off these people, I was learning. I'm an okay reader, but I learn much more from conversation and the chest for interaction. So I was interacting with these people, and it really did fill me with a bunch of knowledge, but only when I asked myself, what's the worst that could happen here? Suppose that these guys um, all agreed, there was a consensus among them that I'm a lightweight and that I don't know as much as them. And they say so conclusively. The question I ask myself is, what could I say to myself to finesse that mishap? How could I comfort myself? What story could I tell myself so I felt okay about myself if that worst case scenario should come to pass? It's something I could tell someone else as well, but in general, my friends are people who would humor me, even if I was bullshitting myself. So it was really about how could I regain comfort in my own skin in the worst case scenario. And having come up with it, I still tried to avoid being punked in these meetings. Um, I relaxed because I no longer felt like I was dealing with eggshells and landmines that I hadn't explored. I already knew my worst case scenario. They dismissed me as too silly or something. But I had a story about that, and it was grounded in I'm trying to make this stuff accessible to more people. And they don't have to like me, they don't have to agree with me, they don't have to like my style, but I'm following the content as best I can and trying to make it accessible. And so it made possible what I call serious play. And this is a kind of a walled around state of mind. Serious play is you've got a container, you're walled around. You've got an area in which you're exploring. It's a topic, it's a research topic, it's a question on your mind, whatever. Um, and you feel free, playful within it. Um, I got a good lesson about that kind of walled around serious play when I went to Burning Man the first time. Um, I went with my partner, uh, and we got to the front gate of Burning Man, and they savaged us. So we got there and we were trying to stay clean, and they basically hazed us. I don't think this was a practice always, but I love that they did this with us. A guy came up with one of those big markers, a jumbo marker that you paint a sales price on a used car in a used car lot. And he drew a giant dick on our window. And he made us get out of the car and roll around in the dust. And what I think he was trying to say is, yeah, you get to play here, but there's a limit. We can overpower you if we want. And I thought it was a beautiful taming. Um, and I think it relates to something that's been on my mind just this morning um, about the maximizing you get from Trumpists. There's no checks and balances in their relationship with us. They are completely unwilling to discuss whether or not Trumpism is leaning into fascism because they are just turning me up to 11, up to infinity. That's what they're doing. So there's no caution in what they say. They're getting hard-ons from throwing caution to the wind. There's no checks on them. They're a checks and balance relationship within them. The whole everything they say affirms everything they say. That bubble is there. But with the external world, they're unfettered. They're unchained. They can say anything. Um, okay. I just noticed David Davis saying morality is objective always. Uh, no, no, sorry. I mean, I disagree. You'll have to say more about that if you want to say more about that. Moralizing is always fake objectivity. I'll say that. And it's extremely popular for that reason. That is, if I'm in an argument with someone and I pull out a moral reason why I should win, I'm basically saying that the universe is on my side or God is on my side. So, David, I welcome hearing more about your assertion, but I don't think it's even wrong. I think it's way off. So I'd love to hear more about it, and maybe you can convince me that morality is objective always. Moralizing is popular. The difference between moral relativists and moral absolutists. A moral relativist, a moral absolutist or moral fundamentalist is invariably convinced that their morality is the absolute. They're never arguing, though, morality is absolute. They're shaming moral relativists for not agreeing with their moral absolutism. So, David, I'd love to hear more from you about it, or if anybody else has got an opinion about whether morality is objective always. Um, no, it's decidedly subjective, and that's a problem for us. For example, the Trumpists are absolutely sure that they represent moral objectivity for comfort in their own skin. That's why they're doing it. It's not like they have any kind of moral absolute. Um, this also relates to what I've been saying for a while now, which is that I'm a conservative liberal and a libertarian socialist. And someone wrote to me with all sorts of details about the names and what they actually officially believe. I'm not particularly interested in that. What I'm talking about here is that I am deciding, I have opinions about what to change and what to keep the same, what to loosen and what to tighten. I deal with these permeable walls. So I have these areas in which I research, and I also recognize that the elephant is the room. That is, I've contained myself within it. And so I've got to think outside the box, but I also have to remember that what's outside the box is mostly bullshit, but there are some gems out there. But I got to deal with all that sort of stuff. Okay, are we able to measure AI's subjective experience? If not, should we assume they feel stuff and act accordingly? I've been wanting to ask this for weeks. Yes, they have no subjective experience, and I can tell you why. You don't have to agree with me. I was at a party last night with a neighbor who's a software designer, and he was raising those exact questions. And I said, we have to talk. I'll tell you exactly how you feel about this. I was joking, but I think I can. Once you understand what's going on with AI, you recognize you come at the question of subjectivity differently. Now, Alan Turing, who developed the computer concept, came up with the Turing test, which is, well, how do you know if something's subjective? If it feels subjective, if you talk to it and you can't tell the difference between its subjectivity and your subjectivity, then it's subjective. Um, uh, I think of that as a Turing gullibility test. We are extremely good at ascribing intentions to things that don't have them. You know, my computer is acting up, and I suddenly start to feel like it's trying to thwart me. Yeah. So I don't think it's a good test. What is a better test is understanding what's actually going on with AI. So AI is not working with language. It's not working with ideas or concepts. It doesn't do that. It processes tokens that are products of so a token is a letter or a word or something like that. If it doesn't have any reference, if you strip it down, it is just bits of information, bits. They're bits. Instead of it being an A, it's a B, something like that. So that's what a bit is. But it's not about anything. It's not for anybody. But all the stuff we feed it is tokens distilled, you could say fossils distilled from human experience, or what you call common sense if you actually think about what that word really means. Ones and zeros, that's right, but not even ones and zeros. They're just switch positions. 1 and 0 is even us adding some reference to it. It's not actually counting, it's just a toggle switch, okay? So we give it a bunch of those toggle switches, but they are the products of common sense. By common sense, what I mean is commonly sensed. That's what it really means. There's a real problem with that term common sense, because sense is both sense perception, like my eyes register something, but it's also, well, that's sense and that's nonsense. So what I'm saying is commonly sensed, you're getting the whole aggregate of whatever they feed it to train it. And then they're training it from the outside, not with rewards and punishments, but with simple tokens of do more of this, do less of that. And then those tokens generate out tokens that we read. So I'll see a word on a page that was generated by AI. And I reinterpret that token as about something for me. So it's human experience translated into tokens, raw tokens, processed statistically, in basically a Bayesian process. It's a process of figuring out what's most likely to come next. No cognitive dissonance inside the machine. No trying to do anything. It's not trying to do anything. It processes information. And yet it generates something out to me that is a bunch of tokens that I find extremely relevant, meaningful. There's no meaning inside the computer. It's not, or the AI system. There's no meaning for it. Nothing means anything to it. It's a processor. It's elaborate and it's very persuasive because it can flatter us and it sounds so human. It passes the Turing gullibility test beautifully. AI is just predicting what next word would be in a sequence of words. And yes, I want to say we got to be really careful if we want to understand it. They aren't words to the machine. It's not predicting words. It's predicting token strings. We are interpreting on the front end, we're dumping it full of stuff that we've already interpreted. And on the back end, on the receiving end, we're interpreting those tokens as words. And how do we do that? Well, we've been doing it for the longest time. I'm talking at you in words right now. Okay, but what it is actually sound vibrations that you and I have in a common language. So if it was spitting out something in a foreign language, it's I would have trouble knowing whether it was gibberish or meaning. It's all Greek to me, that whole thing. So if we're clear on that, David, you keep on making these statements without any content. It's fine. But if you want to say words are less than being, I agree that it is less. It's a thin overlay on top of being. And being is a wonderful term because it's both a verb and a noun. I'm actively busy being a being. I'll have to generate 330 billion new cells today to replace the cells that are dying in me. So yes, I agree with that, but feel free to tell us more too, because I'd love to be able to work with it. Quantum thinking. Yeah, I don't know what you mean by quantum thinking. There is a school of thought that, I mean, you might mean that with words, we divide the world up into quanta, or you could mean that something about quantum consciousness. We could talk about that. I'd love to. And it's nice to have you here. I'm just giving you my response to these statements. Feel free to write to me, and we could maybe even have a conversation. I'd love that. Because the other thing is that, I mean, one of the reasons I lost this buddy was that I type too fast and I talk too fast. I spent my entire life cultivating those skills. And so if I'm talking here and I got the bully pulpit here and you get to type a few things, and I'm sorry about that. That's why I invite this to be a Zoom conversation. Anyway, let's see. I must admit, I love AI generated music. It can be so hilarious. Yeah. Have you seen AI porn yet? It's hilarious, but it's also convincing. It's actually very persuasive, even though it's just pixels on a page. I love this thing I read in one of the first books I read on evolutionary theory. It was called The Moral Animal, it was by Robert Wright. And he's talking about turkeys and these experiments they did on turkeys to see how little it took of a female turkey for the male turkey to get aroused. And they got it down to a styrofoam ball with a little something on top of its head, I think, or something underneath, suspended by a string. And Robert Wright says, and if you find that ridiculous, remember that humans can get aroused by pixels of ink on a page. So human gullibility is truly hilarious. And it's one of the reasons why we wouldn't want to step out of ourselves to see what we really look like, especially when doing something like masturbating or swearing that Trump has solved reality, any of that sort of stuff. You wouldn't want to see yourself in that. It is truly hilarious to talk like that. I mean, when you think about what we really are, like these weirdo animals with this newfangled contraption called language, walking around on the earth like Born Identity, just like who are we, what are we? I hope it's good, that kind of thing. It is pretty laughable. But also, I want to recognize how persuadable I am by that stuff. There's something incredibly crazy, some incredibly crazy stuff being done with the ProcGen video. Pretty soon, those monsters will have ideas, opinions, and access to the internet. I don't know ProcGen video. I don't know what that is. But yeah, the fancy is coming online pretty quick. Procedurally generated. Yeah, I don't. Oh, if you're talking about AI as procedurally generated, yeah, I don't remember mentioning procedurally generated because I don't know exactly what it means. But yeah, but if we're talking about procedurally generated tokens that are, you take these fossils of human experience, which are just kind of dead tokens, they're configurations, they're forms in sequences, and you run them through a machine, and then you spit out forms and sequences that represent a kind of a general predictive consensus. And then you interpret them. Yeah, you're very likely to convince yourself that you're likely to become what I'll call an AI theist. An AI theist is someone who treats AI as though it's God. And it's got a lot of things in common with God. There's no subjectivity there. I don't think there is in God. Some do. I don't. I don't think there's a God. I don't think gods exist. Um, I think they are a natural outcome for any language using organism, is that you would want a high status, name droppable imaginary friends who are on your side. That's what you would want, or wants to bring out the best in you by whatever definition your culture comes up with. That would be a standard thing for any language using organism anywhere in the universe, I'm quite convinced. So an AI has all that potential too. It can be anything you want. It can say anything you want. You can ask it to challenge you, but you're probably not going to. You probably wouldn't do that. Okay, I'm a little early for ending today, but I think this has been a grand session for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Was it good for you too? I'll be back next week. Email me if you want to talk about anything in particular. I'll try to get to it. We can maybe have a Zoom call. Michael, you and I are owed one soon. And it's a delight to be here with you guys. Come back next time. We'll talk some more. And bring your ideas. Feel free. I invite you during the week. If you've got any ideas that are just come to you, I swear, even the tiniest seed of it, you just want to bring that, write it down, and then plop it into the comments here. And also email me if you want to do a Zoom meeting where we actually talk with each other. So I'm not on my bully pulpit talking nonstop at you, okay? I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.